what I wanted to do today is introduce 4 incredibly passionate people about fixing the #1 killer in America, heart disease. So we have on the phone, we have Dr. Shen. Joseph Shen is one of the founding inventors of a multifunction cardiogram, which is one of the latest technologies that can identify heart disease much earlier than conventional technology. We also have Dr. Bill Besterman that has spent 20 plus years developing optimal medical therapy for people who do have risks. What are the best interventions to address it? And we have Dr. Danish Gary. He's moved out of a very specific specialty and into primary care because he sees the incredible need to create proactive primary care. Tonette Krause-Wood is the new, recently inaugurated president of the American College of Preventive Medicine. In my mind, if we could do proactive primary care, where we're actually proactively identifying problems early, we use the multifunction cardiogram to find those problems early, and we use best optimal medical therapy to treat those, why does anybody die from heart disease? It's like we just need people to hear that there are solutions to this huge killer, especially when half the people that die, their first symptom is their heart attack that kills them. That to me is like, that's crazy. So why don't we start with Dr. Besterman? Why don't you do an introduction?
Okay. Many years ago, 40 years ago, I went to a small town in South Carolina as the first full-time internist there. Little 62-bed hospital, didn't have an ICU, and the closest ICU was over an hour away by automobile, no helicopters then, over 2-lane country roads. And so we cranked up an ICU right away. I was medical director for 8 years, but I lived at that time in low country, South Carolina, which isn't so much different than coastal Louisiana. And half the people died of heart attacks and strokes. Small town, and I had to face those people and tell them all this bad news. It was just awful. So I got very motivated very early about how can we cut down on this thing that's killing half the people in coastal South Carolina. Then in 1995, information began to come out that if you have stable angina, bypasses and stents don't keep you from dropping dead, like Daryl said. It's optimal medical therapy. And that knocked me over because, I'd sent hundreds of people to have revascularization procedures. So, I was just blown away. But right away, I became a little obsessed with figuring out what optimal medical therapy would be. And then in 2008, the COURAGE trial came out that is entitled Optimal Medical Therapy with or without. And there's no difference. If you had a stent or if you didn't have a stent, it was optimal medical therapy that saved you. Now there are 15 trials that show that. There's another trial in patients who have had a heart attack or a stent that shows that optimal medical therapy versus usual care lowers mortality by 90% over 4.5 years, and it saves $22,900 per year. Equally dramatic results in the Steno trial of type 2 diabetics. So this is all worked out. There's a mountain of evidence. 2 of the lead authors from the optimal medical therapy revascularization trials have advocated optimal medical therapy as a universal standard of care 5 years ago, and still not much has changed. So that's really what I'm all about.
Dr. Danish Gary, introduce yourself.
And my background, very brief, is I'm a surgeon scientist. I'm double board certified in urology and female pelvic medicine, reconstructive surgery. This is the field I founded actually at the Cleveland Clinic and became board certification. Through my I was, through my career, I was the chair of a couple of departments for several years. I came to realize that there is a significant misalignment in the healthcare system. As you know, majority of the American people, they think our system is sick and needs to be revised.
Nice. Thank you. Dr. Shen, why don't you take a couple minutes and introduce yourself, and then Dr. Kazawit.
Hi, this is Joseph Shen. Traditional EKGs are obsolete, only accurate 30% of the time for late stage of obstructive coronary artery disease. Cardiologists, even in the best institutions armed with the gold standard tests, still produce 60% false positive rate, sending tens of thousands to unnecessary angiograms, facing high costs, delays in diagnosis, injury, even death. In addition, they will be exposed to radiation, IV drugs, and stress. Women more than men, in particular, die from cardiovascular disease simply due to lack of better tool. In order to develop such a tool, I decided to leave my thriving clinical practice in 1997 and devoted my life to create a solution to this dilemma. The MCG technology, multifunction cardiogram, a new sophisticated cardiovascular functional measurement tool designed to truly detect, monitor, and quantify all potential root causes at all stages of heart diseases, from the very early to the very late, while also measuring the impact of treatments on patients' recovery as a whole. I'm very happy to report that our team, composed of 2 generations of relentlessly dedicated physicians, mathematicians, and computer engineers, has successfully created a digital signal processing, deep machine learning, and AI analysis platform that only requires a 10-minute test to collect resting EKG data without the need for radiation, drugs, and stress exposure, and the fear for injury and death. This test, supported by a centralized mathematical analysis engine, can dramatically improve clinicians' diagnostic capabilities far beyond what cardiologists can deliver at its current stage, especially for comprehensive detection, quantification of all stages of pulmonary, infectious, hypertensive, and metabolic heart diseases, just to name a few, at a fraction of the costs and waiting time demanded by current state-of-the-art tests. After decades of research, multiple high-quality, peer-reviewed, published clinical validation trials from all around the world have converted skeptics into paying customers and supporters of MCG technology. Without any quid pro quo, independent investigations have conclusively rated MCG as 5 times more accurate than any additional EKG or current imaging tests. We have done our homework to ensure that MCG works in a real-world point-of-care settings. The device has been cleared by FDA of multiple nations, has its own unique CPT code, and was chosen specifically by the medical directors of Highmark Medicare as a replacement of current stress imaging tests on the market. As a revolutionary bedside diagnostic tool, MCG is equally excellent for both men and women in early detection and primary prevention, can easily be converted into a consumer-facing system to meet the demand of telemedicine-based cardiovascular disease control care. Thank you.
Dr. Shen, I just want you to add one piece, and that is what I thought was so exciting about your technology is that literally someone can be tested within 10 or 15 minutes. You can take the machine out to the person.
That too.
You don't have to have this huge MRI or CAT scan, and it can fit in a briefcase and is no bigger than a small laptop. So just describe the product, just your multifunction cardiograph.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Daryl, for your patience. We have a technology that's basically a computer chassis and the laptop attached to a 2-lead EKG recording device. One is V5, lead 2, and that's the only similarity we have with the traditional EKG. After that, how the data is digitized, how the data is translated and conformed, mathematically transformed, and then going to the machine learning algorithm, then the database, and all that stuff is completely new.
All right. Well, I can sum up. Thank you again for having me here. It's wonderful to be among these excellent panelists. I am a physician scientist from Tulane School of Medicine and the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. I'm also a preventive medicine specialist. And my work has really focused on hypertension, both in research as well as that translates into clinical practice. As this group knows and every healthcare organization knows, hypertension is the most common outpatient chronic diagnosis. It, along with diabetes, are the two leading comorbid conditions that are listed on all hospitalizations. It's critically important, and focusing on the prevention of hypertension and its progression and its sequela is really key, I think, to ensuring that we have a healthy community and have built-in resilience to this. We all also know that the two pillars for treatment of hypertension are related to diet and exercise, so health behaviors, and the second are evidence-based medications that are affordable and have been well documented to actually reduce the adverse consequences of hypertension, including stroke, heart attacks, heart failure, and related diseases. The big problem that we have with both of these is patients' adherence, right, to both of them. It's hard to adhere to diet and exercise over a long time. It's also very difficult to adhere to these medications. We know that many people will experience hypertension as a silent disease. They don't know that they're sick until they're actually diagnosed. And then, of course, for some, when they take the medications to lower their blood pressure, the medications make them feel worse than when than before they were taking the medications. So this is a key and a critical issue that we have. And it certainly compounds the management that healthcare providers and the healthcare system have to do in managing patients with this very common chronic condition. Another side of this is the aspect of clinical inertia, right, where healthcare providers are faced with helping to manage patients with hypertension and related comorbid chronic conditions, and yet often they don't want to increase medications if patients are not adhering, but in many cases, they're not adjusting accordingly in order to achieve better blood pressure control. The evidence is clear. Lower blood pressure is associated with fewer heart attacks, fewer strokes, and fewer incidents of death, right? So we're very much aware of that, and we know that healthcare systems that support the attention to hypertension and the aspects around it and related chronic diseases is going to be critical and very important to this. So what we're looking to do, and I do a lot of research not only in looking at adherence, we've got measurement tools, and also looking at the determinants of adherence and what are the factors that we can address, but also doing a lot of work in implementation. So talking about, the evidence base that we have for managing hypertension, knowing that we have affordable drugs that can manage it, we continue to have a problem with uncontrolled blood pressure, and we continue to have a problem with the adverse consequences of that. Our former Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, said drugs don't work in patients that don't take them. And of course, patients can't take them if they're not prescribed. So it's something that we have to work with in making the right thing to do to help patients have a healthier, more engaged, and higher quality of life and well-being. The right thing to do, the easy thing to do, the right thing to do, the easy thing to do. So as I have done a lot of work in implementation research, we do get a lot of feedback from individual patients about the challenges that they experience with doing the right thing for their health. And some of these are related to just sheer cost of treatments, whether it's food. Healthy foods are expensive compared to foods that are not as healthy. It's also, sometimes costly for people to engage in physical activity in safe environments. It can also be difficult for patients to adhere to medications when lifestyle approaches do not manage their disease because they cannot afford them. They're choosing between buying food for their families and deciding whether or not they're going to get their medications for this coming month. So it's important that we have a comprehensive assessment of this, facilitating healthcare systems and the healthcare providers to engage patients in taking care of themselves and meeting them where they are while addressing some of the social determinants of health. We know that cost can be barriers, transportation can be barriers. Some of my colleagues on this call today have already mentioned those things. We know that it's also just access to the appropriate foods, to the appropriate medications are also challenges that real people face on a daily basis. So we have the evidence, we have mechanisms to do this, but coming together and engaging our patients along with the healthcare system and things that are going to, get the problem upstream before we're in the emergency room or on the OR table, right? Getting stents or having other types of interventions, that we can help engage them way before that happens so that they can enjoy not only a longer life, but a healthier life with greater well-being.
Thanks, Dr. Danishkari. Tell a little bit about your focus on proactive primary care and how if we could get in front of primary care, we could identify people with heart disease earlier.
So if someone asks why they're sick, I would say 3 reasons. One is there's too many intermediaries between the provider and the user of the healthcare, provider, doctors, and user, what we call patients. Not all of us are patients. There are too many intermediaries, so we have been separated over the past 7 years. And because of this intermediary, there's a significant misalignment between these two. Currently, the providers are benefiting from the patient being sick. No one is financially benefiting from the patient remaining healthy. To the contrary, if we find a magic solution that all of our population remains healthy, the entire 5,000-based hospital sick care system will go bankrupt, right? Because of this misalignment, there's that's number one. Number two is because of this misalignment, there's a significant waste being produced in the system that only benefits the provider sector, hospital-based sick care system that I call it, that now employs over 70% of the physicians. And with that waste, we have become the most expensive and mispriced system in the world. So coming back, and therefore now the cost of sick care for cost of what we call healthcare for an average family of 4 is 50% more than the cost of housing, is 100% more than the cost of transportation, and is 400% more than the cost of food, the 3 earlier essential needs of a human being. So in order to fix this, the disruptive innovation we need to do is not to come and create a single payer system and all that other stuff. What we need to do is to realign this together. Again, the provider and the buyer and the seller of the healthcare services to be basically aligned, meaning the doctors benefit from keeping people healthy, not benefiting from people being sick. That is number one. Use that traditional trust to reduce the waste in the unnecessary care. The solid research shows 50% of what the sick care system is nothing but waste. They do it because they make money. I was the king of one of them, urology. We could do as much as we could to make RVUs. And so this unified unit can basically reduce the waste by literally doing good doctoring. No, you do not need that back surgery that is unnecessary. You do not need that stent placement and so forth. So with this concept, I created the Bowtie Medical, which we have created this alignment. We have without going through the system, and the first step is to create the primary care, because 90% of people's need is primary care. So as the first step to align the primary care with that individual. And then equip the primary care with a care team that is aware of the differences in cost, the different cost of MRI, different cost of the procedures, can help that person to basically regain their control as a customer of healthcare. Not only as a consumer, become a customer. When I go to the orthopod and I have a hip pain, and he says, oh, I'm going to replace your hip, I say, why? Can I do something better? When I go to a cardiologist and I say, I have this, I have high cholesterol, say, here it is, I'm going to put you on pills and I'm going to put an stent to you. I can ask why. And not only I can ask why as a customer, now I have an aligned physician with me, aligned care team, who can help me clinically, scientifically, have that discussion with that cardiologist. No, the best way to reduce the cholesterol is not to take the statins, is to change your lifestyle. That is the best long term. You could use the medications and so forth short term, but long term, or the stents or the cabbages in the world, they showed that they didn't work. So that alignment is the number one thing that we are building, what Daryl calls a proactive primary care. It's really, we have created a care team that has doctors, advisors, people who do price shopping, and we basically offer that as a membership to the individual and later to their employers.
Thank you. What I would like, if you wouldn't mind, the three of you, and maybe starting with you, Dr. Wood, just address this big issue of, is this huge problem, heart disease, something through proactive approaches and supporting people's lifestyles, is it possible and is it reasonable to think that we can make a huge dent in this major killer?
So I'll be happy to provide, my comments. So yes, it is still the leading cause of death in the U.S. And knowing that some of these factors, like hypertension and other chronic conditions that my colleagues have mentioned, are important modifiable risk factors for this, certainly make it doable, right? But we do have to address in a systematic way the key barriers that are keeping us from achieving these goals. And some of the areas, one is just initial awareness and diagnosis, which my colleagues have already brought up strategies to do this. And the other key component is adherence. We've got to do more than just ask a simple question. We have to assess this in a way that then we can tailor communication and messages to patients to help them engage in their health and in their wellness to make a difference. And so I think, this is critically important. We keep talking about hypertension as an ongoing clinical and public health challenge, and it is the single most important modifiable risk factor for cardiovascular disease, and yet we continue to struggle with this. My team and I have developed a very simple open access tool. It's not copyrighted. It's available that healthcare providers can use in a clinical setting that ask patients just 4 simple questions about their adherence. And this gives you an opportunity based on their responses to tailor messaging to the issues that patients are facing, right? And to do this in a way that's helpful. This also can engage the healthcare provider in adjusting medications if it needs to be, or adapting their lifestyle recommendations for patients based on what they're doing with their adherence as well as their disease control. There are a couple of things that we're doing that also make this very important. And one, we have evidence-based guidelines that are out there, but their translation into clinical practice is minimal. So healthcare systems, and healthcare providers need to be educated on these, see the evidence, know that their work, and implement this in a systematic way that makes it easy for people to follow. Train individuals on how to do that. They've already been proven to be effective. The second is that we need to make sure that we're measuring our outcomes correctly. One of the most incorrectly measured variable is blood pressure. And there are standardized ways to do it. And between what happens in typical clinical practice with a blood pressure measurement would be versus what would be done if you were using correct techniques, there's a 10 millimeter on average difference in blood pressure being higher in clinical practice than it is in real life. Well, imagine if you could be treating the patient to the right target, they won't need as many medications to control their blood pressure because you're going to have an accurate reading. So healthcare systems can certainly engage in that, in training their individuals and calibrating their systems to make sure that in primary care settings and in prevention settings, we have the right information that's accurate using validated, techniques to do so. And of course, implementing these methods of measuring adherence in a simple way in real world and real-time settings so that we can tailor communications in the very limited amount of time we have with patients. They spend what? Maybe 5 hours max a year with their healthcare providers in office settings, and they're spending the other 365 days, or 364.5 in the real world. And so we need to be able to tailor the messages and things that resonate with them and address their barriers to adherence as well as to their uptake of evidence-based treatments.
Thanks. Dr. Westerman, what are your thoughts about, can we really address this number one killer? Can we eradicate it? Can we reduce it?
So I agree with Dr. Wood definitely that we can do better. And there's a lot of evidence that supports that. So, the number of patients in the United States who have their pressure controlled at goal is actually getting worse in spite of all of our new knowledge and new tools and all the rest of it. Well, at Kaiser Permanente in Northern California, they have a 90% control rate. And how do they do that? Well, they have a team of pharmacists and nurses, and that's their job, control the blood pressure. Whatever it takes to control the blood pressure, that's what they do. They use a protocol, and I've come to believe that our current arrangements just won't get it done. You've got to have these teams, protocols, population health tools, and a payment model that supports it to do what Kaiser Permanente did. In heart disease, they did the same thing in Colorado. Why they don't do these things everywhere is a mystery to me. But anyway, they do the same thing with heart disease in Colorado, and they reduce the mortality in the highest risk patients by 90% over 4.5 years. If we did what they did in Colorado with a team of nurses and pharmacists, we could lower mortality by 90% and save a ton of money doing it. It's $21,900 who's had a heart attack or a stent is the annual per patient savings, and they have 12,000 patients in the program. So if you multiply 12,000 times 22,000, that's a big number. So not only can you be a lot healthier, but you can save a bunch of money.
I think you brought up a very excellent point. I think beyond what we have known, there's so much we need to know more to learn about medicine, practice medicine. I think that the most poignant example is the recently published ischemic trial, $100 million, 10 years. And what they discovered is that there's absolutely no difference in outcomes between conservative medical therapy and interventional therapy treatment. Absolutely zero difference in outcomes. On top of that, that is hidden in the data, look at the data set, about 15% of people treated by both arms suffered MACE and sudden cardiac death included. And the reason is that there are missing components that we're all talking about here. I think that from our clinical experience using our technology to look at tracking patients from long-term and the large data set, I can say this. I think the precursor of coronary artery disease is primarily metabolic. No, there are other causes like hypertension, heart disease, pulmonary heart, smoking, and other environmental agents. I think a big percentage of the early precursors of coronary artery disease actually is metabolic based. And when the coronary disease is defined clinically by the cardiologists, And the metabolic components continues to contribute to the pathology. So you can call it oxidative stress, you can call it ischemia, you can call whatever you call it. And the problem is that that contributing factor alone itself can be easily reversed by, Bill just talked about it, intermittent fasting and maybe metformin. And so insulin resistance, consider the how to manage the insulin levels. And I think all these things should be part of interplay of managing chronic illnesses, and without jumping to putting people in this to go through a coronary angiography, to the stent, to the bypass surgery, and consider it as a cure. I totally disagree with that, because I've seen patients come out with the bypass surgery, still had very high ischemic burden. Now, what happened there? They're type 2 diabetics, okay? Their diabetes is not under control, and they're headed to a downhill. They have people have no signs of heart failure ever, all of a sudden develop heart failure. What happened there? Metabolic heart disease. So what we can contribute is a tool that we worked all our lives that probably can begin to crack that code, to give you a sort out clearly what it's contributing to this, and what is the additional 15% people suffer MACE. Can we detect those? Can we do something to reverse those, to prevent that from happening? I think from that angle, I think we can begin the process of completely eliminate premature untimely death and MACE. I think that's very, very critical. And so that's, I think we hope to contribute somewhat a small part to that, making that progress.
In the last couple minutes that we have, I would love for each of you to take just a minute and send a message to employers, because the focus of this is employers. You're the buyer of the healthcare system. You're in the best place to let market forces move us towards the eradication of heart disease. So, Dr. Wood, would you start by saying just a few minutes, and it could be bring in a preventive, medicine physician, but whatever message you think is most important within just a minute or two that employers need to hear.
Well, thank you for that segue into that. So certainly, I would fully support healthcare organizations looking at preventive medicine physicians that are trained to look at population health and can help with the management of these chronic conditions that contribute to cardiovascular disease, who know the aspects of guideline implementation, lifestyle coaching, as well as looking at the evidence and helping translate this information into something that can be adopted practically. It's important for healthcare systems to train their employees about accurate measurement of blood pressure. So I'm going to support that. Train their healthcare providers with regards to implementing those guidelines and avoiding clinical inertia, and in incorporating an assessment of real-time adherence, so that we give our providers the tools to engage our patients in taking care of themselves. And in many cases, preventive medicine physicians have that training, and I think could be incredibly an additional tool for healthcare systems to meet their goals.
Nice. Dr. Besterman.
Sure. I've looked at a couple of examples of populations of employers recently, and diabetes was 18% of the cost for one of them, and cardiometabolic disease was about a third for another. So these are very common problems, and they make a big part of their cost, and they cause them to lose good employees too soon, and those are very hard to replace. It costs a lot of money. I think we need to begin to look at this differently. If optimal medical therapy is a lot better today than it was when these studies were done. So now we know that spironolactone interferes with aldosterone effects, which cause the metabolic syndrome and raise your blood pressure and all that. We can block that very directly. When these trials were done, we didn't understand that. Also, the new drugs like Jardiance for diabetes, they interfere with that same master metabolic switch I was talking about. Well, the impact of that is you can cut progression of chronic kidney disease, and you can cut the progression of heart failure by a third by giving Jardiance, which was developed for diabetes. But it works in diabetics and non-diabetics. So it slows kidney disease and it slows heart failure, whether you're diabetic or not, the diabetes. So leaders in cardiology are beginning to say, we need to think of these not as risk reduction drugs, but as organ protective and cell protective. And I'm just excited that the new science can do a much better job. And Dr. Woods, preventive medicine doctors, ought to be able to do a great job with it as well.
Thank you. Dr. Shen.
Yes, thank you. I think that the opportunity is 21st century opportunity is definitely here. I think the best practice medicine is early detection, prevention, buy time to reverse diseases, hopefully, using all the tools in our arsenal and in an organized manner, in the evidence-based manner, and supported with the industry. So it's very important. The industrial leaders, as the employers, should take lead in this to give this early detection prevention culture a chance to develop, to really become contributors to a better health and a huge savings for the healthcare system, and cut the cost for the late disease management type of approach by early detection prevention. Not only can save lives, we can save money, and also we can save time and improve quality of care. So quality of life, quality of care. So please give us a chance, and we will show you. Let us show you. We can do this.
Nice. Thank you very much. All right. Hope you enjoyed that recording, that video. I'm going to see if we have any chats coming through. Please take a minute if you've got some questions. We've got Dr. Krausewood and Dr. Shen on this live with us, and would certainly enjoy entertaining any questions that you've got. Maybe while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, Dr. Wood, is there anything you want to add to what's already been said on the video?
No, other than just to reiterate the importance of a team approach in addressing this very important public health and clinical challenge that we have. So many important aspects were brought up in the plenary, the opening plenary today, as ways that we can work together to address innovative aspects of management of these chronic diseases that contribute to heart disease. And so looking for insights and innovations from this aspirational healthcare conference that may also motivate individuals to achieve these goals.
Great. We have a question that just came in. Do you think that blood pressure medication could be prescribed via telehealth and a home remote BP monitor? Who would like to take that? Dr. Wood?
I'm happy to provide some initial comments, and then Dr. Shen also, I think, looks like he has comments. So we're actually doing this if individuals are trained on how to manage and how to take home blood pressure monitors and their measurements. This can be used to modify medications and to manage patients remotely. I have to say, for one of our studies, and many of our clinicians in the time of COVID did this in using remote monitoring and telehealth strategies, where they were able to use Zoom type technology to observe people while they were taking their blood pressure measurements, and also look to evaluate and talk to them about side effects and other aspects. So short answer, yes, I do believe with the proper training and observation of how patients are doing this, we can get accurate measurements that can be sent either via the telehealth or electronically to health records to help patients manage their blood pressure, and to do this remotely. Home blood pressure monitors are included in the guidelines because we know that patients' blood pressure in clinic it can differ from the way it is at home, and looking at both of these settings is important for appropriately managing patients with high blood pressure and to address, any issues that could arise from hypertension.
Thanks. Dr. Jen.
Yes, I totally agree. I concur. And by the way, I'm very impressed with the setting that you guys put together. This is excellent. I'm very, very happy to be part of this. I believe that there are two components that we need to pay attention to. One is we really have to create this culture of early detection prevention and involving everything arsenal in our hands possible to reduce cost, to detect early, to do something preventative, and then guess what? It can avert the later tragedies. I think that's really the key. The other part is that we probably need a better technology in how to measure blood pressure, how to monitor them, make them consistent. That means throughout time, look at circadian rhythm, look at different environments. And I think the current measurement is a little bit too episodical. I mean, you do once in the morning, once in the evening, or maybe you do it once you visit a doctor, or you don't do it at all. I think that is a major gap in technological advancement. But with that said, I think Dr. Woods was absolutely correct. You need to have both various different environments measured, so you know that if the tool is correct, if the person was wrong, if the environment is correct, or the environment was wrong. All these things should be part of this circadian rhythm or overall systematic measurement. Then you can tailor your treatment correctly, and then you can really bend the curve down. Not only the cost and also the life saved. So yeah, I'm happy to be part of this very, very much. Thank you.
Nice. So we have another question that just came in. It says, have incentivized exercise programs helped to decrease healthcare costs for companies? And I would like to address that first, and then I'll let the two of you. Having been in this space now for over 20 years, there's one incredibly important principle you have to understand. Incentives will get people to do simple tasks, but they're extremely ineffective at getting someone to make a complex behavior change. So a lot of wellness programs are based on, let's incentivize someone to do a challenge, or for 30 days, keep track of their steps and that sort of thing. And yes, there will be some improvement during that period of time, because people will do almost any simple task if you give them a big enough incentive. That is very different than engaging someone in a complex behavior change where they adopt new lifestyles. That's my 2 cents. Either one of you have some comments or thoughts about that?
Yeah, I've been doing this a long time now, and because I want to develop a tool to measure success of lifestyle change, because there's no such a tool out there, and I believe we have one, because we can measure the cardiovascular response to your fasting, intermittent fasting, the ketogenic diet, or exercises, or other lifestyle changes like sitting too long. And all these things actually are measurable. Okay. Now, if this tool is made available to an individual or to a physician, they can do a bedside test about 5 minutes, and you can actually tell, okay, you did something last week. Let's see if your heart is responding to it. I think that's a very good incentive to push people to say, hey, if you don't do this, you might die from this. Okay, and I think that's a very, very strong motivational factor, but that's not enough. The most important thing is that it has to be a lifetime commitment, because guess what? It's your own body, your own body. And how to do this, the best thing is to protect your body by early detection, lifestyle change, primary prevention, and also guess what? It's going to cost you less as well. I think that has to be translated into a complete culture shift from disease care to preventative care.
Yep. Dr. Wood.
I'll just add to your comments, Daryl, which were excellent, and that incentives might, from my work, might be used on the continuum of behavior change. They might be effective very early on, just to let people see if they can accomplish something and actually reap the benefits. And then hopefully the incentives for staying engaged transfer to away from a monetary incentive to health and wellness, feeling better, new clothes, having more energy and things of that nature. So you are spot on with an incentive usually does not translate into a lifelong change in behavior, but perhaps it has a role in motivating people to at least try something new, engage in something, and then be able to transfer to other types of rewards that could lead to life-changing, behaviors.
And if I could, let me just spring back to what Dr. Eby said earlier in the keynote presentation, that in the NUCA system of care, they haven't used incentives and copays and deductibles to try to drive compliance or to drive people's behavior. It's relationship. And therein lies the key. Incentives will bring someone to a relationship because that's a simple task. But it's really the relationship that builds between the people, the customer owner, the providers, and it's helping people make those small incremental progresses and changes that they feel like are most important to them. And so the foundation of behavioral change, particularly complex behavior change, is relationship.
I agree. And understanding what the patient brings to the table. Absolutely. Absolutely. The incentive might bring them to the well, but it's not going to keep them there. So
exactly. And I should give you a personal example. My son is on medication for high blood pressure. Okay. And he takes it when he likes to take it. I, as a father, I think I'm a failure because even though I'm a physician and I have a hard time keeping be in compliance. Guess what? I recruited his best friends. As you guys have a duty. You have to help him because you want him around a long time. You like him. Okay, you guys help me to do this. Guess what? They jumped on him. And after that, things got much better. I would say he's 95% improved. I believe this community model. I believe this collective type of friend supportive system is vital. You got to have people supporting you, and this way that especially your own peers, and that will change the paradigm. And I think it's one of the most important factors in long-term success.
Thanks. There's one last question that just came in. I was ready to close things down, but we'll take it. How important are adjustments in blood pressure medication after first prescribed? You mentioned many patients have side effects and the blood pressure can be different when at the doctor's office and when at home. Dr. Wood, that's kind of targeted for you.
Sure, I'll be happy to answer this. So if we were to use the example of the multi-site national sprint trial for patients who were diagnosed with hypertension, some were new onset and others were not, this progressive management of hypertension and close following of it and looking at the effects of medications were very, very clear. And it used this stepped algorithm where individuals would start on 1 to 2 medications at the outset of being diagnosed with hypertension, depending on their level, and would be seen monthly for 3 months to assess their response to the medication, to gradually increase the dose, and to assess any issues with side effects in which medications could be modified. So close monitoring and close adjustment of the medications in response to blood pressure control, taking into account their adherence and looking at side effect profiles was highly effective. After 3 months, if the blood pressure was under control, patients were seen quarterly, and the guidelines still recommend that they be seen quarterly at least for a year in determining their continued response to medications and to their blood pressure control. So the short answer to the question is, should patients be monitored and medications be adjusted often when patients are first prescribed? Yes. The key is start with the lower dose, monitor them closely, adjust accordingly, and then looking at the guidelines where currently the American Heart Association guidelines recommend a systolic less than 130 and a diastolic less than 180. But by gradually managing patients and adjusting over time, not an immediate reduction, they can adapt to the medication, understand the side effects, establish that close relationship with their healthcare providers over those months, build that trust, and then hopefully work towards achieving lower blood pressure, which has already been significantly associated with lower cardiovascular events and longer life.
Nice. Dr. Shen, anything you want to mention on that one?
Yes, I like to. I think that the most important thing is to engage the patient and educate the patient. The patient learns exactly what is the central cause of this blood pressure issue. And I think the incentive as a long-term patient myself is, when can I reduce medications I'm taking instead of become polypharma and take a few medications as fewer side effects from that, and learning absolutely important. The other thing is to find the root cause. And essential hypertension is no longer a acceptable diagnosis. Essential hypertension is just that we don't know what the cause is. That's unacceptable. Now we have the tools to help us find out what the root cause is. Now we deal with the root cause by educating the patient, provide self-care, and with a system of physicians and the right tools, I think we can go a long way, finally tame this beast, which is a chronic high blood pressure, and it's a bad side effect and bad sequela into the future.
Nice. All right. Well, we're out of time, so we're going to go ahead and close things down. I think, to just summarize again, the whole purpose of this is to say, look, we really could eradicate heart disease in a significant way if we could just proactively create the right kind of primary care, use the right kind of testing to find things early, and then use optimal medical therapy to address the issues. It doesn't have to be the #1 killer in America. With that, thank you, Dr. Hauserwood, and thank you, Dr. Shen. Appreciate your being with us, and we'll sign off and let you go to the next keynote. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Here we
have
are.
with us today Dr. Besterman and Dr. Shen.
How are you?
Yeah.
So we would encourage anyone who has any questions to send those through the chat, and we'll address those right now. Dr. Shen, do you have anything you want to just share in the way of kind of a summary after the video as we're waiting for anybody to see if they have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I thank you for this opportunity and to participate, and try to get on as many sessions as possible. And I think this is fantastic. And again, I would say that finally we're talking about early detection, primary prevention, how to maximize this opportunity to provide much better care. One thing that's a kind of interesting, I'm from a culture of Chinese medicine. And in China, actually, in a way that the Chinese medicinal practitioners are rewarded by keeping the patients well. And that's how they get paid. If the patient gets very sick and die, and it's over. So they are incentivized to do those things. And that has been happening for a long, long time. Now, I'm not saying they do an excellent job, and they need better tools, better medications, better science, of course. But I think that the basic culture and premise is there, that there is another way for us to carry out the healthcare, and in a way that is much less intrusive and much earlier, so we'll have enough time to sort things out, and also in a way that it's going to be scientifically and evidence-based, and would continue the research, continue the clinical data, outcome studies, continue to find out what is the best practice. And I think with all that as a part of the continuum, healthcare will change for the better. I'm very, very sure of that. So that's my comment.
Great. So we haven't any questions, which is fine. Dr. Bestman, why don't you just, if you've got some final thoughts before we close down the session?
Sure. Well, I think if you really think about it, we have, for as long as I've been a doctor, we've talked about treating high blood pressure and diabetes and high cholesterol as risk factors. But I think we need to move beyond that, because I wasn't just dealing with risk factors. When a person has high blood pressure, that's not just a risk factor for catastrophe of a heart attack or a stroke down the road. It's a measurement that reflects a diseased artery. So the artery is already thicker. It already is affected in such a way that it doesn't distend as well when you exercise. Already abnormal. So when you treat high blood pressure with optimal medical therapy, you're actually lowering the blood pressure, but you're also making the artery more normal. You're making it thinner and where it distends more readily and normally. You're reducing the inflammation, all those things that make heart attacks and stroke more likely. The other thing I would say is that everybody who's attending this conference has a stake in this. It's not just that you run a hospital system or a big corporation, but your health outcomes are going to be dependent on the system we have. And if we continue to think about risk factors and we don't move to optimal medical therapy, new science, new systems, and new payment models, too many people are going to die. We can reduce. You've talked about reducing heart disease. We know we can reduce the mortality after a heart attack by 90%, and we can do equally as well before the heart attack. So, I think it's a great opportunity, and it's low-hanging fruit for healthcare improvement.
Awesome. Well, thank you, both of you, Dr. Besterman, Dr. Shen. We will touch base tomorrow. Thanks.
Good.
Be there.
Sure.
And we have Dr. Shen with us today. Thank you, Dr. Shen, for being here.
You're welcome.
And I believe we may still have Dr. Danish Gary. So if he wants to turn on his mic and camera, we'll include him in this discussion. So first of all, Dr. Shen, one of our participants on the call today, who's a friend of mine, Jeff Ellington, said, Dr. Chen, you're absolutely right. All these things will contribute to knowing one's actual state of health. Part of the solution will be testing for inflammation levels. So just that comment. And he also knows you, Dr. Danish Gary. He said that he's known you for many years. So just wanted to throw that out. Any participant that's on the call today is certainly welcome to send in a question that our distinguished panelists can answer. So anybody's got any questions for everybody, please send those in. Why don't we start with Dr. Shen, since we don't have any specific questions. Share with us your thoughts today. We recorded that a few days ago. There's Dr. Danish Gary. Why don't you just share if you've got, Dr. Shen, what are your thoughts today?
Yes, I think the healthcare is experiencing tectonic shift, and the trend looks like the major trend is people are looking for better and good solutions, healthcare innovation solutions to improve care. I think the focus should be on early detection prevention, as we talked about the last session. Actually, that was the reason 1997 I left practice of medicine and got into creating a technology that can actually do that, deliver the early detection, and so enable primary prevention to deter or prevent a disease from progressing going forward. So I'm very happy to see this. I want to thank you, Daryl, for creating this opportunity for us to have a chance to talk about this, and hopefully we can push the decision makers to look at the early detection prevention part of this healthcare and making it as a primary, most important thing we do. Because a primary care physician, Dr. D knows this better than anybody, takes about 85–90% of people with coronary disease. The only thing is they don't know who they are. They have no idea who they are. So they depend on the cardiologists to figure out who they are, but it's very often too little too late. That's the reason you have all these tremendous amount of people die from sudden cardiac death that have not changed over the decades. The reason is that all the tools designed for cardiologists to detect heart disease is late detectors. You have to wait for the disease to advance to such a stage that it's too little too late.
Yeah.
Okay, give you an example. The stress test requires the patient to have two large arteries blocked at 75%. Guess what? The cat is already out of the box.
Yeah.
It's too late. And majority of heart attacks occurred way before that. Way before that. Less than 50%. So the thing is, the primary care physicians needed the tools. That was my focus of my lifetime, to create the tools and put it in their hands so they can detect from 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, decade. Because now we're talking about 7-year-old kids with coronary disease. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. Remember, we were in medical schools that said, well, you have the 19, 20-year-old Korean veterans. They died in the war. We do the autopsy. We found they already had coronary disease. Oh, yeah. Well, 20. Now we're talking about 7 years old. That's just unacceptable. That's absolutely unacceptable. So that was the passion for me to devote my life to develop a tool so the primary care physicians can use at bedside, determine in 10 minutes, okay, this guy is safe. This guy has intermediate disease. This guy has advanced disease. Okay, then you can risk stratify them objectively, and not just using expert opinion or some preordained narratives, and based on objective data, 100% evidence-based, technology-driven, objective measures. Say, okay, this guy needs certain degree of help. Guess what? What we discovered is that overwhelming majority, I would say 99% patients, even they are in advanced stage of disease, or even they had a surgery that bypass multiple stents put in, there are multiple medications, they still have chance for us to reverse it. Guess what? By adding good food eating habits, and if necessary, starve them for several days, and fasting, or put them on change the medications, optimize their care. Guess what? They do better. They actually better. And one thing about it is that one of my colleagues, cardiologists in Connecticut, in Hartford, he's been working on it with me for 20 years. Guess what? For that 20 years of time, he only sent 2 patients to intervention. 2 patients.
And that's because of the fact that he had a way
Early
to measure.
detection. Yeah, he early detected. He used the technology, and he's telling everybody, guys, wake up. We have a better way to do this.
Well, and I'd love to get Dr. Danish Gary's comment on that and his thoughts about the same thing. Can you hear me, Dr. Danish Gary?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear.
Yeah, and Dr. Shen is absolutely, I think, correct that we are at the verge of a titanic change. I absolutely support all the cardiology, heart health related issues that the distinguished panel discussed. But as they say in the business, first things first. First thing is the system. We need a system innovation that would basically convert the existing sick care system, or add to the existing sick care system infrastructure, institutions, and so forth, who would benefit financially from people being healthy. That is the number one misalignment in the existing system that needs to be fixed. And again, your distinguished panel discussed the $100 million, Dr. Chen mentioned, $100 million study showing that interventions versus conservative therapy don't make a difference in terms of mortality and so forth. And that you can go from head to toe. And I'll guarantee you there are trials that have shown basically all these invasive things we do to try to be heroic and save people's lives. At the end of the day, they do not result the outcomes that we hope so. So to me, the fundamentals goes back. The first thing is that the current system, I'm very thankful. Of course, I spent a good part of my life in being in the sick care system. And one end of the spectrum of the human or the population need, we have established public health that looks after clean water, clean food, and whatever at the public level would allow us to has allowed us to eradicate the infectious diseases as number one cause of death. On the other end of the spectrum, we have developed this sick care system, 5,000 base hospital sick care system, who definitely are driven by basically providing services that are related only to when we are sick, after the symptoms have developed. I believe the Titanic chain Dr. Chen is talking about is creation in the middle segment in between public health and the sick care. We call it the health guardianship. There are organizations, companies, institutions who financially would benefit from keeping people healthy, financially would benefit from reducing the heart diseases, financially would benefit from reducing the diabetes, financially would benefit from people basically having better control of their weight and so forth. I believe if you look at other industries where they have taken this approach, the risk mitigation approach, rather than I think, Daryl, you have said this, is like a driving a car. You know, there's a cliff up there, and the cliff is cardiac disease, you know, obesity, and so forth. The current strategy of the system is we put some ambulances on the bottom of the cliff. Whoever falls off, we take him to the hospital. The discussion we are having is to have an institution who basically not only will build the fence across the cliff, but also all the signaling signs, education and so forth, turn right, don't go, there's a cliff and so forth. So I think this starts with primary care. I think that this time has arrived, and I think I see the buds of innovation around the country. The primary care be separated from the existing sick care system. They go back to their original good doctoring to keep people healthy. And that is not the only thing. If I make an example, and I don't know what time limitation I have, Daryl, please stop me. But if you look at,
we can keep going.
Yeah, if you look at, I have a prime example of that, maybe this Sunday when Sir Charles Benson flew out of space, emphasized this concept in my mind, that 107, the very first flight that human took, the Wright brother, was in December of 1903. So 18 years ago. Before that, if you look at our image of flying, we used to put, humans used to put wings into their shoulders and try to pretend that it was a dream, right? Within 118 years, we have turned that dream into the safest mode of transportation in the world. The donkeys and the cars kill more people on the ground, the airplanes on the air at 40,000 elevation. And the reason we've done that, we've taken the risk mitigation approach. As you know, those of you who fly or so forth, there's a checklist for every step of the way. It's the most controlled mode of transportation. I have family members who fly. I fly with them with different type of airplanes. It is the most controlled system. The entire country is mapped out. You are handed from one air tower control to the next one until you go along the way. That amazing coordination we have created over the past 117, 18 years, and therefore we have created the safest mode of transportation. Statistically, it is impossible to predict an air crash. And as soon as something happens, you know, the 777 as an issue and so forth, the entire industry comes together, finds where the hole was that they didn't see the risk, and they fix it at the system. If we take that approach, and again, this Sunday, as you saw, I watched it fascinating. This Sir Richards and I know Mr. Bezos, they want to take the going out of space as a commercial. You don't have to be an astronaut anymore. So they sat in the usual airplane, 2 other airplanes without a booster or a rocket, took them out of space, sent them in, and 6 passengers, as if they were sitting in an airplane. They came back safely. If we take this risk mitigation, risk reduction approach, now we have, over the past 7 years, generated probably more scientific data on what the risk factors are than how to cure the diseases. We have a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, for cardiac, for obesity, for all the killers, all the common conditions. We now identified basic risk factors, and now we need to create institutions where they can take this knowledge and science and say, I'm going to bring basically clinical information from primary care. I'm going to bring nutritional from the science of nutrition, from the physical activity. And frankly, we even haven't touched the tip of the iceberg. Frankly, I'm sick and tired of telling our people just go and eat and exercise. I know there are very strong fundamental, basically elements for keeping us healthy, but can you imagine if we this year we're going to spend $4 trillion on the sick care system. We call it healthcare. When you look at the NIH budget is $35 billion. We are spending less than 1% of the spending on the sick care system to do research. When you look at Apple, they spend, all the companies who have been very innovative, they spend at least 10 to 15% on the R&D. Can you imagine that if we spend 10% of the $4 trillion, $400 billion on mitigating the risk of the chronic conditions, we would knock out the cancer, we would knock out the cardiac disease, we would knock out the obesity, we would knock out the diabetes. If we make this as a moonshot for ourselves for the next decade, we want to create organizations at the innovative level. We're going to pour part of the waste we have in the sick care system to help them to basically mitigate the risk. I believe we can shoot for a moonshot of everyone could live a full life beyond 100. Biological examples are there that people live beyond 100. We just need to figure out the risk mitigation rather than the spending and wasting the time on, what is the next bariatric surgery we have to do. If you come and spend the information on risk mitigation, biologically we know we are capable of living a full life beyond 100. So that is my closing comments. My call to the employers who are on the call is, you are, as Daryl said, you are providing this budget basically for 200 million Americans. Come and identify the innovative company, frankly, like Orion, like Bowtie Medical. Help us to help you to reduce the risk of the sick care in your employees, rip off the benefit, and add the savings to the bottom line of your company.
Thank you, Dr. Dinesh. We actually still have one of our participants still on the phone, and if you've got a few more minutes, I'd like to address a question that he's posed, and it's Jeff Ellington and Dr. Dinesh. Jeff tells me he knows you and has for many years as well. So awesome. You might want to say hello to Jeff. But the question he has is, do the insurance companies have any interest? Who would like to kind of take that question?
I would like to take him. Insurance is again.
Take it.
Sure. Or Dr. Chen, why don't you go first?
No. Go ahead. You first.
So, yes. So the insurance companies, they have to. I mean, in the short term, they want to basically pay less for sick care. That's for sure.
Be careful.
Right. But then the reality is if I may say, the insurance companies are a part of the existing system. Unless and if they believe in this concept that we need to start investing in basically this new segment of the healthcare, the health guardianship. Insurance companies, as they know very well, they've exhausted all the cost saving that comes out of the sick care system. They paying the 30 cents on the dollar, all that stuff. None of that has stopped the growth of the cost. None of that had made our population healthy. Fundamentally, because of this misalignment. There's a misalignment between the providers, the sellers of the healthcare, and the buyers. The provider's job is to keep that person healthy. But currently, the providers are benefiting from that person being sick. I think the insurance companies can play a role to come in with the companies who can come up and do a capitated program. Come and support the primary care setups that will say, for X amount, I'm going to keep your member healthy. I'm going to keep you basically out of the hospital and reward them financially. These models have been tried in Europe. They're expanding Europe, in Sweden, in France, and so forth. Making a capitated primary care would allow them to be separated from the existing hospital control sick care system, because currently the primary care have become the referral machines for these big systems, right? They buy them in the communities because if the insurance companies come and invest in these capitated models, in capitated models, and that is the first step the insurance companies can join this movement that has already started. Frankly, I'll tell you, I'll make two examples. We are in the area between, was it like in 1975 and 85 when the personal computer was being born, right? The giants of the computing industry, like the IBMs, were asleep at the switch. They had no clues. That's number one. Number two example is between 1990 and 2000 when the internet was exploring. The giants like Sears and the Toys R Us, they were asleep at the switch. And that's why the Amazon comes in and, steals the show from them. I think the hospital system are asleep at the switch and there's no hope for them. There is a hope for the insurance companies because the hospital, unless they change their model, because they're not. The fact is, again, I've worked in some of the largest one, is like during the COVID, there was this phenomenal email came from the CEO of one of the largest and most prestigious sick care systems. He said, population of Ohio, I know you need testing for COVID. We will do the testing for you, but only if you're sick and we are going to admit you. If you want to get the testing because you want to be healthy, staying or going and not spreading it because you want to go and visit your grandma or your child, go somewhere else. During the COVID, in my opinion, the sick care declares its intention so clearly. They're in the business of sick care. The same CEO had a meeting, in a private meeting, was telling basically some of the wealthy people in that community that how now they have figured out how they can make money out of the COVID sickness, how they can lower the rate of ventilator dependence, all that crap that frankly they measure themselves by. But the intention was, now we have figured out the Mother Nature has given us another cause of sickness called COVID, long COVID, short COVID, and now we know how to make money out of it. And I'm going to present to you that I'm doing a better job than the other hospital. This CEO is not thinking how the concept in the population mind is, how can I not get the COVID, right? So going back to this concept of the question that Jeff asked is, I think the insurance companies, because they're going to be with us and so forth. If they see that the hospitals are asleep at the switch, what they need to do is to come and at least investigate, explore the concept of investigating or investing in the initiatives in the companies who basically can invest and benefit from keeping people healthy. I think that would create an alignment, a good alignment between the providers and the insurance companies.
Dr. Shen?
Absolutely. I think that's very eloquently put together. I think I just give you my own experience trying to get our technology into the market to really help people make a difference. And I just give you one example. One of the primary care physicians in Louisiana is one of my customers. And he did his search, due diligence, find out that there is a solution that can actually early detect the heart diseases and cardiovascular problems and can buy him time. So he tried to get coverage from the insurance companies. What he got was pushback, especially from the cardiologists that working for the insurance companies and saying that, well, this and that, and deny and all that stuff. So finally, he got so fed up, he wrote a letter to basically expose their hypocrisy. And he has a letter published on my LinkedIn page. And he said, I want this to go public to everybody to see this. This is wrong. And I think that is really, really symptomatic of what we're experiencing here. Now we have a solution that can detect problem much earlier and also can quantify the degree of the disease and also can help you to sort out what are the contributing factors to the problem. And then what you can do to mitigate, to reduce, to reverse, and quantitatively, objectively, okay? And ethically, most important, is to prevent the patient from going to the hospital, getting a cath, or getting an interventional procedure, which may or may not work.
Yeah.
And so that is really the key to the future of healthcare. And I think Dr. Dees right has fingers on the pulse that I'm now getting customers from self-insured employers saying that, you know what, I don't care if this insurance company doesn't cover, we'll cover it, we'll pay for it, because this is going to really change how we manage patients with heart. You're turning my primary care physicians into cardiologists. I'm for it. and you know, it's coming in now. It's like, it's wow. To me, it's like, that is, I say, I can feel the tectonic shift in healthcare because I'm dealing with an unpaid basis. So you're right. I totally agree. And you know, let's take the lead, go forward, and these guys are gonna have to follow. Well, there are gonna be early followers, there are gonna be late followers. Yep. You want to be late? Well, okay, you can be late, but guess what? You'll be probably left behind. Just like the competition between the big bookstore, there's Amazon, and what happened to the bookstore now? Nobody's talking about them anymore. They're gone. Amazon's sending more books than anybody. So fine, you know, let's do it. That's all.
Well, gentlemen, we're about out of time. We actually need to start preparing for our next one that starts in about 10, 20 minutes or 10 or 12 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and close things off. Let's address a question that came in the last time that we didn't get a chance to really address. And that was, how do you break through the fact that so many who represent this deficit-based system are financially incented to keep it in place? You know, the representatives of the insurance companies are often the ones who are kind of preserving the current system. Who would like to address that? Dr. Shen, would you like to take a shot at that?
Okay, I try, and I think that's probably the pivotal key question needs to be answered. Where the incentive should be putting the emphasis on. I think the paradigm shift is on what you incentivize. Are you incentivize late-stage disease care, which is often too little, too late, very costly, or you promote wellness and early detection, primary prevention, which not only can save money, save time, also can save lives and prolong lives. I think that question needs to be answered. We already have the evidence to prove that. I think now is the time to have an organized meeting of the minds of all the industry stakeholders, come back, say, hey, let's look at that. And here's the evidence. And forget about the inertia, forget about the deep state, or you say that the corrupt forces that in the market. And we as people, and particularly reasonable people, employers, employees, as people, if we have family members and we have brothers and sisters, we have friends that they need better care. And so if we can, you know, by doing this, the benefit is that we'll no longer have people who die all of a sudden without even knowing what hit them. And, you know, they were talking about it. 50% people die from sudden cardiac death. The first time they know their heart disease is death. That's crazy. That's not acceptable. And to me, that's the reason why I devoted my life to develop technology to start solving this problem. But we need help. We need everybody to come in to contribute to really steer the ship to the right direction, because we're headed downhill and headed to a cliff. And maybe there's ambulance to catch us, but you know, I think we better turn it around and to a much brighter future and 21st century solution. Early detection, primary prevention, save lives, save money, save time.
Thank you. Dr. Besterman, what are your thoughts? And by the way, again, let me just remind our attendees that we'd love to have them send in questions that we can answer, like we can address.
But I think this is really the key question, because if you are talking about chronic disease, and that's 86% of where all the spending is, other countries are doing a lot better job than we are, like Singapore. So Singapore, people in Singapore live longer for 1/4 the impact on gross domestic product as Americans. We spend over 18% on healthcare in terms of GDP. They spend less than 5%. And so there's this huge disparity, and they live longer. So we have a system that's low in value and low in efficacy. And I don't think encouraging doctors to do better is going to do much of anything, because this is a really systematic problem. It's a system problem. Your employers ought to understand that they produce their products through systems. Well, I can talk about the new science till the cows come home, but if you don't have new systems, teams, and population tools to implement that, you're not going to make any progress. If you don't have a payment model to support it, you're not going to make any progress. So the biggest barrier to making progress is the fee-for-service system. And we're not going to get better healthcare at lower cost until we move to value-based care. And that means you're producing care for less money, and the employees are healthier. So this is the crux of the matter. It's the key issue. And there are lots of, virtually every hospital I know of has a quality improvement department. And they all think they're doing the work. They all think they're managing these things as well as they can possibly manage. You don't have a comprehensive solution that involves payers, other stakeholders. If you don't have a comprehensive solution that brings together new science, new systems, and new payment models, you're not going to make progress. The Institute of Medicine mapped this all out 20 years ago, and we just ignored what they told us needs to happen. But what they wrote 20 years ago is just as true now as it was then.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from one of our participants who actually represents companies, and a number of different companies. And the question is, have you considered suggesting the CEO do one of two things? One, find a medical team to help you characterize your employee cohort. And two, protect your employee investment by bringing in preventive health care to the employee. Who would like to take that one? Dr. Shen?
I'm in a discussion with the multiple employer-owned programs in discussion, and I listen to what they have to say. I think the concept of early detection prevention to lower cost is pretty much understood. Okay, and the thing is, because as you said, the misalignment in the system and reimbursement versus a fee for service versus for incentivized, for value-based, the outcome-based healthcare. I think the key to that is to provide evidence step by step, implement step by step. That's to show that there is a better way to do this, and then to make a lot of noise if the data comes out and say, hey, we have a better way to do things here. And so it has to be based on evidence, based on data, has to be data driven. Then you can go out and make the noise, because then you're saying that you're not just saying something, pull a rat out your, pull a rabbit out of your hat, and that's magic. No, you're doing it based on scientific evidence. And
Dr. Shen, let me just step in and ask you, is that not what the NUCA system of care in Alaska has now proven over 20 years? That's kind of why we're highlighting them at this conference. They have the data to show it works.
I get it. I totally agree. And the NUCA system I heard of for the first time since I joined this conference. I never heard about the NUCA system until now. Maybe I'm late in the game, but that needs to be, people need to know that, and I think this is the conference like this will bring the information out. But I think that overall the media, the the government and especially the major employers all should look at this, give this model a chance and try it out. We're not saying that you're going to turn the whole ship around right away, in next minute, but the next few years, we should take the incremental change and look at data, look at it and the outcomes, say, hey, this is a better way.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we start.
Dr. Besterman.
Well, the NUCA system is really interesting. I mean, I've studied that thing in some detail, and they have taken on an extremely challenging population, Native Americans in Alaska, and there's no way to get to them. So 85% of their visits are done remotely. They don't even see the patient. And yet, with that very difficult population with higher rates of diabetes and chronic disease, they're providing care for half of what the rest of people in Alaska pay to get taken care of. And it's more than that. So the NUCA system applies that methodology to everybody. They have a very intense primary care-based system. The Singapore people have this habit of developing best practices in most of what they do. They came in and studied what NUCA was doing, and they said, well, that's a lot of cost for 50% of people don't generate any cost or disease anyway. Let's focus this effort on chronic disease. So NUCA does it for half the cost. Singapore does it for a fourth of the cost, a fourth of the impact on GDP. And they have primary care one-stop polyclinics across the country of Singapore. And within those clinics, they have hypertension, and diabetes, and lipid teams that focus on the kind of patients that we've been talking about. And so they're using protocols, they're using population health. They have a focused effort, and they pay 1/4 as much in terms of GDP as we do for healthcare. So the answers are out there, but Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex, and this is the medical-industrial complex. And both of them are these massive beasts, have a great voice and lots of money, and change is a threat to their power and money. Okay. And so you can rely on it. They're going to fight this tooth and nail. And so we're going to have to bring the stakeholders and employers, really government people, rely on big medicine for campaign contributions and all of that. If we're going to solve this problem in the United States, our natural allies are employers. And that's need to bring these stakeholders together because it's a problem nobody can handle. No one state, no one employer. It has to be a highly collaborative effort. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. And I would like to add
Absolutely.
a couple of thoughts about that same question.
Yes.
And that is, I get the chance to get in front of a lot of employers. And to me, when you're talking to the business leader, the CEO, the most important message isn't how they need to get involved in fixing healthcare, because they have a business to run and they don't have the time to create a whole new healthcare system. But they do have the power and the means to align the system to work for them. They always tell me they want to attract and retain top talent. Number one biggest thing they tell me. They want a healthy, productive workforce because the product is better going out the door when their employees are healthy. They want employees satisfied with the healthcare system, and they want it to cost less. And I asked them, okay, have you aligned the system, and are you tracking and trending to see whether you're getting the 4 things you want? I asked, do you give your CFO bonus if they give you profitability? Sure. My salespeople make bonuses if they bring in revenue. But how many of you have ever recognized, incented, or bonus the very people you put in charge of the second largest cost of doing business, healthcare benefits, to give you the 4 things you say you want. And they look at me, and not a single CEO, after talking to more than 1,000 CEOs, has put in place a basic business 101 strategy to have the people they put in charge aligned to give them what they want. Because they would then in turn align their benefit consultants the same way, put them on a fee-based contract and say, look, your benefit consultant gets to make more money when we get the 4 things we want. And now they'll begin to drive the system. The whole system needs to make more money when the customer gets what they want instead of just the opposite. Now, we have another question that I think would be good to address, and that is, have you considered recommending a new business model that brings healthcare to the patient versus expecting the patient to come to the provider on the provider schedule and location? I can't think of a better example than NUCA. They've been doing this for 20 years, superior outcomes, half the price. Why? Because they did exactly that. They brought the healthcare system to the person instead of expecting the person to go to healthcare. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Dr. Bestman or Dr. Shen.
Okay, I'd be happy to say that. We are actually creating a consumer-faced MCG technology with a wearable device. We only need 2 points from your body. One is the chest on a B5, one is the lead 2 from right wrist to left ankle. That's it. And a couple of ankle bracelets and a couple of wrist bracelets plus the chest lead. That's all we need to collect data. And so we can go directly to consumers and give them the results and completely automated, computerized, and they can get the data that based on the risk that we stratified, then we can give them certain guidelines, and with telemedicine support, with telemedical support, or a nurse practitioner or trained physician assistants, and even community members that they support each other. You can form a network of people who will drive the demand for healthcare. Instead of they've been told what you need, now they have in control what they have to do to reverse what the problem they have. So it's a problem solving oriented and consumer driven model. And now what happens is that we're actually gaining a lot of traction on partners to join us, especially in one of the oldest EKG makers in Japan, or more than 100 years old. Guess what? Join forces with us. That's the thing we want to do into the future as well. So I think
you're speaking specifically about your machine, the multifunction cardiogram, and how you're taking it to the patient. Go one step further and talk about the question about all of healthcare. What are the benefits of bringing not just the multifunction cardiogram closer to the patient, but the whole healthcare system closer to the patient? Or Dr. Vesterman, if you want to address that.
I'll pitch in here because I think this is, you can get a critical insight here. So NUCA, out of necessity, 85% of their visits are remote. Well, the only reason patients with high blood pressure, high sugar, and high cholesterol go to a doctor's office is because a doctor gets paid to go in a room and generate a note about their high blood pressure, high glucose, and high cholesterol. That's what he gets paid for, and that's the only way he gets paid. So if you don't come into his office and go in that room, he doesn't get paid, and the whole system's arranged around that. Now, I actually worked with high-risk hypertensive and diabetic patients for a major employer, and they wanted us to do something innovative. Well, you can measure a blood pressure measured at home is more accurate than the pressure measured in a doctor's office. And we had a system where a guy could measure his pressure at home, send us the reading. My nurse would look at it first thing in the morning, and I would tell her, make this adjustment in the treatment. Well, the best example of how that can work in the employer's favor is we had a very high-level salesman who lived in California, My office was in East Tennessee. He worked literally around the world, and his blood pressures came into us over the internet just as reliably as anything. We adjusted his medicines remotely. When I first saw him, his blood pressure was 170 over 100. When I saw him 6 months later, it was perfectly normal and everything was okay. And I'd only seen him 2 times, and I was happy to do it because they were paying us based on achieving blood pressure and diabetes control, not because we went into an office, generated a note. And so think about it even locally. If your workforce doesn't have to take half a day to go sit in a doctor's office for 2 hours, get their blood pressure medicine tested, that's much less disruptive to your workplace. And employees are much more likely to participate and do what needs to be done. They don't want to take a half day off. Some of them have really great jobs, and they don't want to put that job at risk by being out of the office too much. So that's the general thrust of it. There's absolutely nothing about adjusting blood pressure, sugar, and cholesterol that requires a doctor's visit beyond getting acquainted with the patient, establishing trust, and developing something of a relationship. But the management itself can be done almost entirely remotely.
Well, and I think, Nuka's a great model of a group up in Alaska that did it, but there's an emerging industry here in this country of virtual direct primary care practices where it's primary care on a subscription basis, where now they're aligned with the patient, they're aligned with the employer. Their goal is to keep people healthy, and they can largely do everything telephonically. And occasionally they might have to have somebody go in and see a physical physician, but that idea of remotely connecting on a regular basis where, just like with Nuka, I can call my doctor or my doctor's team any day, any hour, whatever I need, it's always available, and they're coming to me remotely, and we're having this healthcare experience on my terms, in my values, in my goals, and along my journey versus me coming to you and being a benefactor of your great wisdom.
Yes, I agree. Well, physicians actually should be rewarded for evidence-based decision making. That's where they get paid.
And they should be based on outcomes.
Based on outcome, based on value they provided, and the savings as well. The incentive should be based on that, not based on how many visits, how many procedures. That's fee for service. So I think that's also a critical element in how the reimbursement should be considered, how they get paid. And the other thing is that because the internet, so because the advent of the telemedicine, especially the last couple of years, and I think that's completely doable now. The work model, how the physician will work in the future, take care of patients, is transforming rapidly in front of us. And so, we want to be part of that.
Carol, I just have one more comment.
Yeah,
sure.
If those practices that you mentioned are not using best practice optimal medical therapy protocols, they're not using population health tools to look at baseline clinical and financial outcomes and following those quarterly, and if they're not willing to transparently report that to the employer on a quarterly basis, are you having fewer heart attacks? Are you having fewer strokes? Are you saving money? Are pressure, sugar, and cholesterol better controlled? Then those organizations are not likely to improve health and improve cost. You have to have a comprehensive solution that combines all of those elements.
Wouldn't you agree that if we build the right incentives where it's all aligned with the buyer, those aligned incentives will drive those outcomes and will drive those savings to where the system will then provide it. I mean, it is the alignment of incentives that will bring about all of the best protocols to accomplish those goals.
Yes.
Yeah, but many employers don't really have that information.
No, and they haven't aligned the system to work for them. They need to start by aligning the system to work for them. Then the system will bring them what they want. As long as the employer continues to allow the system to give them what they don't want and make money doing it, the system will continue doing that.
Yeah, and I think in conjunction to what you proposed to the CEO, the C-suite leadership said, okay, you should incentivize your management team in charge of healthcare, and it's the same way that you incentivize what we talked about, how the physician should be reimbursed and based on their delivered quality of care, value, outcomes. And if you base on that, and everybody incentives to line up like this, from top to provider level, then the patients are motivated because they do better. So if you have this kind of three things combined together, then I think the whole healthcare system is going to shift, and a lot of hospitals are going to be going bankrupt.
One of the comments that just came in was,
I'm telling you, that's
you're absolutely right. Yeah. One of the comments that just came in is, so shouldn't it be a fiduciary responsibility of any business leader to actually drive those aligned incentives?
Oh yeah, you better believe it. We all do.
Well, yeah. Well, I think most of where this actually happens is at the middle management level. So you've got a middle manager talking to a healthcare broker, and that's where isn't that where these decisions are made? So the CEO isn't even in the loop.
Exactly, which is why the CEO needs to put that HR manager who's making those decisions in a position to where their incentives are aligned with the CEOs. The breakdown isn't in the healthcare system. The breakdown is within companies and the alignment between what the CEO wants and what the person managing it wants. And it's like they'll do business one-on-one with every other part of their business. But when it comes to benefits, even though it's often the second largest cost of doing business, you never see those business one-on-one strategies. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's unfathomable. It's just unbelievable. And two things are crazy. 50% people die from cardiovascular disease. For the first time they found out is that they have disease, they died. The other one is that the incentive for the middle manager, for the healthcare managers, and it's to spend more money. Really? That's your incentive? No, you should be saving money and line up the incentives,
What I've been told is, the broker, the middle manager, healthcare benefits manager, have a nice relationship, and they're going to lunch and playing golf and all this. And, the decision's not based on business 101. It's based on long-standing personal relationships. Is very difficult to break in.
It is. Well, gentlemen, it's been wonderful. We need to start moving on to my next breakout discussion. So I'm going to say thank you again, Dr. Shen, Dr. Bestman, for being a part of it. Thank you for all of those that have participated. Appreciate your questions. And we wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Awesome. Good being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.